Alright, hello everyone, and welcome to my official Satisfactory Trains tutorial! In this video, we're gonna go over, well, basically everything to do with Satisfactory Trains, having a heavy focus on track placement. I get asked a lot about the trains that I have running in the factory, so I figured for our example, we would hang out here at the nuclear power factory. Got a lot of trains. This is all remotely sourced. We have this little extension for the nuclear waste drop-off, which adds a kind of a cool extra loop with one of our trains. But one of the big things I want to do is track placement, because in Satisfactory, track placement is a bit of a tricky beast. Different than conveyor belts, hypertubes, pipes, these things, they place easy. They have neat little systems to calculate turns and angles and stuff, and it makes it very, very easy to place. This, you won't find so present with train tracks. Train tracks have a couple of rules, and once you understand these rules, it actually makes them super easy to place. So first thing is perfect 90-degree turns, and by extension, perfect 180-degree turns. Both are possible and, you know, necessary if you want to be keeping things neat and organized. I bet you're going to be wanting to make some of these angles. So to do this, you need to have your rail placed on the seam of the foundation. So when I typically place rails, I always place rails in the middle of the foundation. There's one simple reason for this, and it's to hide the seam. There's always a seam between rail sections. The rail section can only be about like 12 foundations long, so if you have a train track longer than that, it's gonna be in sections. Here's the seam. It's quite visible from up close. Not so much from far away, really not so much from far away, but up close you can definitely see it. If this is on the edge of a foundation, I find it to be a lot more obvious than if it's in the middle, right? Especially if you have suspended train tracks like that. But for 90-degree turns, now, I can't explain why, just simply because I do not know, but for 90-degree turns, for the smallest possible radius, which is 3 foundations, just like so, it has to be done at the edges. If you do it from the middle, it's gonna end up like 1 block longer. So if you want to do that turn, you got to make sure you're square up on the seam of 2 foundations. From there, your turn's going to span 3 whole foundations in front of it, and then counting the same foundation twice, 3 here. So the train track will end here, perfectly straight. Bingo! Look at that. You know that's straight because if you continue placing it, it'll continue placing straight indefinitely. You'll know it's not straight if you try to continue placing it and it starts to develop an angle. It'll be very little at the start, but it'll get worse over time. Also, if you wanted, you could easily just turn this into a 180-degree. And see, once you know the angles, it's super easy to build train tracks, right? Because I know that this is going to end at the seam of this foundation, because you can just count it out. 3. 1, 2, 3. And then see, now we've got a perfect 180. So that's the first thing to know. Now, it's worth noting, you can place 90-degree angles in many other ways, but this is just the smallest way, right? This is the smallest 90-degree angle that you can do with the train tracks. So the second big thing is this kind of stuff right here, right? So sometimes you find yourself in the situation where you're trying to connect 2 pieces of track. Or you're just trying to straighten out 1 piece of track, right? Somehow your track's gotten a little curve there, maybe it was the landscape, who knows, but now you want it to shoot straight again, and this can be kind of easy, you know. Sometimes you'll find you can just find an angle that works for you there, but other times you're going to be like, I want it to go right down the center of this foundation, or I want it to go right down the center of that foundation, and then you're going to find that it might be a lot harder to find your straight spot, or even worse, maybe you want to connect to another piece of track that's already been laid out like that. And so you got to connect these 2 bad boys together, and you know, you're inching them closer and closer. But actually, by adding in more rail segments, it becomes more difficult to connect because the angles become too sharp for the game to accept. So getting this track to run straight down this foundation could be really hard to do. But if you place a little bit of rail and then connect the two pieces, you'll find this a lot easier. You might have to do some playing around to find the required spacing, because the train track can never turn too tight. But this will allow you to measure basically the shortest distance in which that angle can be corrected. And see, straight down that foundation. Trying to figure out this angle by hand would be very hard to do. So to summarize, if you ever find yourself in the situation of trying to correct a strangely angled track, or connecting two strangely angled tracks together, don't try to work them together incrementally. Just do it in one big, long piece whenever you can. So aside from placing tricky little pieces of track like that, well, you know, there's kind of another one, following ramps. Okay, so with trains, now, I'm not gonna say it's straight up impossible, but I find trains, for me, are the best on the 2-meter ramp. So I like to use the double-folded 8x4 meter, but as you can see, it's the same steepness as the 2-meter ramp, which is less steep than this, the 4-meter ramp. I find this is too steep for trains and train tracks. The tracks don't place well, and the trains do not drive it well. It's too steep. I always use this pretty much everywhere, whether we're talking trucks or trains, this is the one to use. And mostly I actually use the double ramp, 8-meter by 4, because I find it looks nicer in most situations. The best way to get the best placement on your tracks, in my opinion, seems to be by starting halfway on the foundation. So at the top of your ramp to the bottom. This should work for no matter how long your ramp is. Just make sure that you have that half foundation at the beginning and the end. This way, you can just place the shortest possible segment, and it'll keep real nice and close to the ground there. There's lots of ways you can do this, but you'll notice using other strategies, the track won't place so flat. So these exits are kind of a little funny, and they're a huge backbone on how our train system works. Basically, they feed traffic into the back of the train stations. We do one from each side, so no matter which way trains are coming from, they'll have the option, if they choose, to go in. And then we nest our stations all together, so the train will just choose its exit. Obviously, this whole design opens itself up to possible overlapping. However, I find if your trains are all on different enough schedules, the overlapping is very rare, and doesn't bother me personally, so I haven't done anything to combat that. I've definitely seen it happen on many occasions, but as you'll notice, it doesn't happen super frequently. So in order to make one of these exits, you're going to want to drag this track out to the next foundation. So if you place a gap in the center of the foundation, yes. Always the center, unless you're doing a 90-degree turn, which we're not, so center. You won't be able to place it here, too sharp. It's gonna be this one, second foundation over. Place it right there. Then, you're gonna take it and pull it straight. Right on the center of this block here, it'll straighten out. So I found that to be the smallest amount of distance that it takes to pull the track straight down the center of both. Here is an example of one of our T-junctions in Satisfactory. Basically, this is just providing an intersection between two opposing sets of track. So, obviously, this is a active intersection, and to show you guys how this works and how to make this, I figured it'd be best to work with a fresh, separate piece of track. Okay, so here is our three-way intersection to be. So it's just a piece of rail that I already have in my train system. No trains are actually currently coming down this particular section of track, so it's perfect for us right now. And then I just made up a pretend set of track that might, you know, go up that way somewhere. Who knows where that track's going? So, I've left a few extra blocks in place, and these blocks are important because these intersections work in series of 90-degree turns. And as you guys know, 90-degree turns are much easier if you measure them. So I'm going to show you guys just how I get these measurements as well. It's actually pretty easy just using that rule of threes. So if you're building your train tracks like I am, and that's just what I'm going to assume for these intersections, your train tracks have to have the same spacing, otherwise it's not that it's not going to work, it's just going to turn out slightly different. So if you're not spacing your tracks 3 blocks apart, 5 blocks in total, if you count the foundations the rails are actually on, then this is going to be just a little different. But I'll just assume you guys have 2 tracks, each on the center of a foundation, with exactly 3 foundations between. This has got to be true for both sets. So, on your furthest facing, I'm going to do my furthest south track. You're going to want to find the middle point between your pillars here. So my pillars are actually 11 blocks apart. You can count this real easy just by multi-selecting. Just hold control. So the center, I know, is 5. This is just between the pillar, which marks the segments of the rails. Now, it's worth knowing my pillars are actually 11 apart, but this works much better if they were to be 9 apart instead of 11 blocks. But you can work around that. So either way, find your center. Should be about 9. Build straight across. Make your 3 blocks here. What this is going to allow you to do is it's going to allow you to delete this track and replace it with a little piece of track here. Just like so. So now if you come over to the other side here, you want to make sure that you bring your opposing track within 3 blocks of the track you're going to merge it with. So this is meant to place just right here. Always placing on the center of foundations for this build too. So 1, 2 empty spaces, and then the third is your track. So this provides you the spacing just about to make this first turn. One block in from there. And then you can make that turn, and it'll be perfectly measured, so it makes a nice, even turn. Now, it's also worth noting at this point, you really want to pay attention to which direction your tracks are going. So just keep in mind your traffic. Your right hand traveling forwards should connect to the far side, so it ends up on the right-hand side here. Again, very, very easy to get wrong flowing traffic. Not a big deal if you do that. Easy enough to correct. So it's the exact same pattern for the other side. There you go. And you'll notice when you merge your tracks, they automatically put switches. So that handles half of the intersection. So trains traveling eastbound on this track now have the option to exit to go northbound. And trains that are coming southbound on this track have no option but to arrive eastbound here. So basically, both of these exits function just for the eastbound side, but that's only half the job. You want to get this side of the track into the system as well. So I'm going to start just by deleting that piece of track. So this measurement is just about as easy. Again, you're just going to be doing the rules of 3. So if we fill in the gap here, we're going to have 1, 2 go in there, 1, 2 go in here, and then they meet here at the third block. Now, like we were measuring in the beginning, my pillars are 11 blocks apart. It's on the 5th block that you mark your center. So 4 blocks on each side, and then the pillar. So that will end that there. And then you can just do a real quick connect. This is the shortest piece of track you can make. It's got to be just over a foundation long. And we can just repeat the process for the other side. So thankfully, tracks do not collide with each other. So building tracks over one another is no problem at all. Do keep in mind, though, tracks that overlap can both have a train on them at the same time. So there is the possibility with this design that you are going to get overlapping trains. So that does it. That handles the exits. So now these trains that are going westbound have the option to exit here northbound. And these trains coming out southbound now have the option to exit and continue on westbound. It is a good idea, though, to restore this piece of track here. Otherwise, your trains won't have an option to go straight through. Put that there. Train can go straight through. Trains can use the intersection. It's got a bunch of options for them. So you'll notice this place is a lot of signals on the tracks. If you are using trains and programming them with routes, they will automatically handle the switches. So when you're driving a train, it just defaults to the switch's current direction, which you can sometimes... The manually toggling switches is... I don't recommend it. It's glitchy, it's inconsistent, the switches are kind of weird, and if you do have AI trains operating on the same track, they'll fight you for the switches, so they'll, like, actually totally override your switch input to follow to their own destination. So I recommend, even when you're in a train yourself, just decide where you want to go. Press V to open up the menu. Select the station that you want to head to. Let's just say, like, oil drop-off. Turn on the autopilot, and then close the window. You have to close the window to refresh the changes you've made to the timetable. Your train will take a second, and then as long as you have built your tracks correctly, as long as there's actually a route, he will automatically set the switches and take you to your destination. So yeah, thanks for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. See you guys in the next video.